And today I'd like to welcome you for a session on pruning with Fred Kraus, who's a consulting forester from Missouri, and Harlan Palm, who's a Missouri landowner. I believe I will turn it over to you then. Fred, I think you're going to start.
Yeah, I had a little routine going here, or going to have a rah-rah type cheer to get things going, but that didn't work out too good. The dress didn't fit and all kinds of stuff. So we'll kind of get into it. Why prune? And the most basic answer is to increase the quality and the value, the dollar value of your crop trees. Most of the information you're going to see today is aimed at walnut. However, there are other trees you may want to prune. I've pruned buckeye, bitternut hickory, tried Osage orange, gave up on that. A few other trees, but for the most part, we just want to prune on trees that have some kind of economic value and makes your time and effort worthwhile economically. And right now, here in Missouri, black walnut and white oak are those two. I don't think that I'll ever get anything out of my veneer Ohio buckeye, but you never know. So, anytime anybody has any questions, go ahead and jump in. But the purpose for the pruning is to get a lower log free of defects. And that's where the most of the value of a tree is in that butt log or bottom log. And from there, you want to try to keep it fairly straight. By pruning, you can increase the value 2 to 8 times, kind of depending on the markets. I had a recent walnut sale last week that had 142 walnut trees in it. Obviously, they weren't pruned or managed in any way. The current owner, when the trees were small enough to prune, he was in high school. So pruning probably was not part of his on his radar. Consequently, they weren't pruned. 17 of the trees were clear on all 4 faces. So if you walk completely around the tree, there wouldn't be any defects in the lower portion of the trunk. 31 trees had 3 faces clear. In other words, had some kind of defect on one side. And then others had, typical lightning strike, deer stands, crooked. But over 90 of them, the main reason for their defects was limbs. And that's why we're here today, to address that. I mentioned 3 and 4 face veneer logs. Generally, the minimum for A-grade veneer butt log is that it's got to be the bottom log. You need to have a minimum length of 8 feet. We see 8 feet, but you're really looking 8 feet 6 inches because they need trim. And from that point, if you got the 8 feet 6 inches clear on all 4 sides, and it's about 19 inches in diameter at chest height, that would give you a diameter inside the bark of 16 inches at the end of an 8-foot log. And that's kind of the minimum requirements for an A grade. You can go longer, and of course you can grow them bigger. Within that A grade, you get a larger tree, like a 36-inch diameter tree. It's going to be worth probably 3 times per board foot that a 19-inch diameter tree would be worth. So the value, besides the added volume, you get the increase in value per board foot. But you still want to concentrate on that 8-6 inches. You can go higher. In the old days, we used to, I shouldn't say mills would slice some 16-foot logs. And now I'm not sure you can get a 16-foot log sliced anywhere. Most of the material is sliced on 4 meters, 12 feet, So if you had a 13-foot log or 14-foot log, it probably wouldn't be sliced, they'd cut it back. In that same line, a large percentage of the veneer trees are 8, 9, and 10 feet long. But if you want to get a little bit extra money and a little bit bigger tree, then grow them to 12 feet, 6 inches. And if you're really into pruning, then you can push the limbs on up higher or remove the limbs higher. And if that's the case, then you'd probably want to do it in 8-foot multiples. In other words, have the butt log 12 feet, 6 inches, next log 8 feet, 6 inches, next log 8 feet, 6 inches. You know, you keep pruning like that till you run out of tree. So the main thing is try to get the quality so you have some dollar value there. You know, that particular sale I just mentioned, if the trees had been managed, we can assume that every tree you prune or that you should prune is going to be a veneer quality tree. That doesn't guarantee it. You know, Mother Nature interferes, woodpeckers interfere, lightning interferes, but you still have a high percentage. In this particular sale, if all the trees have been pruned and managed, then instead of the price he got, it would have been about 5 times higher, which was a big jump. But like I said, the landowner, when he was 17, 16, he wasn't interested in trees. So I think that the main thing is we can't really prevent the lightning or bird peck or whatever. We can't eliminate crooked trees. We can't eliminate limbs, and those defects can be in the form of that currently out there can be in the form of knots, limbs, stobs, or even cat faces. You can't erase a cat face, but the limbs and stobs you can remove and greatly increase the value of the tree. So Harlan is here to tell you how to do that and make the silk purse out of a sow's ear. And one thing Harlan's probably heard me say it, or at least parts of it anyway, but you know, always think about pruning early, prune often, and prune high. So thank you. You're on deck, Harlan.
While Harlan's queuing up, Fred, we do have a question that we could wait to hear Harlan's, but I think it's relevant to what you just said. Bob Ball asked, how much allowance do we need for the average stump height? Trim does not include stump height, correct?
Most of the, well, it's whatever part of the log that's harvested, but most of the loggers will cut the tree off pretty close to ground level. That particular sale that I'm talking about, it's silted in some places 2 and 3 feet. And one of the trees was 37 inches in diameter, but it had 6 feet above the ground. If they can get 2.5 feet out of it, it goes from a $500 tree to a $5,000 log. So they'll be digging, but for the most part, wherever they sever it off, whether it's flush with the ground or 2 inches off the ground, that's where the 8'6" starts counting.
So if you had a lot of taper that might be a little higher, would you not agree?
Very few trees have problem with taper. Usually where I see a fair amount of taper is that something's wrong internally with the tree. You know, you may be 20 inches at chest high at 4.5 feet off the ground, and up another 4 feet, it might be 16 or 15 inches. Typically trees have a fairly uniform taper to them. And whenever we're figuring out the DIB, the diameter inside the bark of a theorized 8-foot log, we take off a couple inches for the bark, an inch off each side. And then for every 4 feet of log, you take an inch off for taper. So a 19-inch tree on the average diameter outside the bark at chest height will have a diameter inside the bark of 16 inches at the end of the log. Sometimes there'll be it goes up and there'll be a big limb, and it'll actually be larger at where the big limb is. They have to trim it a little bit, but still the DIB is larger than it should be. Very seldom is less. So I don't think about taper that much.
Okay. And Walt asked about cat face, what that was. I'm wondering if maybe Harlan has an example of it and make it easier to explain. And Harlan, you are muted. One more thing to worry about. Bottom left. Do you need me to walk you through it on the bottom left of your screen, Harlan? You may have to unshare. After you did such a good job on that sharing. If you're not seeing the mute button bottom left, then you need to unshare your screen so you can get to it. Okay, now try unmuting.
Okay, I should be loud and clear now.
Correct. Yep. Now go ahead and share again. Sorry about that. When your screen shared, some of the buttons disappear. Great. You're set.
Okay. This pruning guide is available on our Walnut Council, whatever the terminology is, and it's under Missouri, but any of you coming from other states, you can still access it and so on. And there's technical, presentations, or not presentations, but items just like this and so on. Anyway, and this was in a little bit different form. This was given out at a national meeting, Walnut Council meeting, probably 20, 25 years ago. And it was helpful to me as I was kind of learning how to do it and so on. And I did do some modifications through the years and so on, but this is just a one-page deal here that can help with people that are just getting started. And that's kind of what my whole presentation is about, is helping people get started, and so that they aren't wasting a lot of years and ruining trees or something like that, making the wrong cuts. We can kind of swing through this quite fast since you can access it on your own later on. But prune basically during the dormant season. We're in the dormant season now, and January and February, try to get it done by 1st of March. Use good quality sharp clippers, pruning saws, telescopic pole pruners, and so on. I'll show you the equipment in a different slide. After confirming the lower stem on young trees is healthy and undamaged, make pruning decisions starting at the top and work down. And what I meant by is the base of the tree healthy? There's about 3 things that come to mind that can really, in some cases, permanently mess up the bottom of the tree in the butt log there. The things that come to mind are the one that, oh, I don't know how common it is, but I heard about it years ago and so on. And I did find probably half a dozen of them in mine. And that's sun scald. And I know for some of you folks that are just new in the Walnut Council and so on, you're hearing terms that Fred used, and you'll hear some of mine that, what in the world are they talking about? And I think sun scald is a terrible name for it, but I think you can pull it up on the internet regarding walnut. What it is, it's hard to describe, but when the walnut seedling, or not seedling, but sapling, maybe about 1.5 inches, 2 inches in diameter. Let's see. I don't know if, let's see, if I hold that up, I don't think you'll be able to see it. Maybe later on. But anyway, this combination, the temperature is such that the little sapling is basically frozen. It's maybe, you know, say 30 degrees, 29 or something like that. And you get some snow, and the next day at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, if the air temperature is up to say 31 degrees, and the full sunlight glancing off that snow up there, maybe about 15, 18 inches up the trunk of the tree, young tree, the temperature is maybe up to 32, 33 degrees. And that tissue thaws out for just maybe an hour or two, and it messes it up. And that never covers over. You'll end up with a snout sticking out and so on. Physical damage to trees with mowers and that type of thing can happen most devastatingly as the spring is maybe getting into late April, May, and the cambium tissue is laying down the new xylem on the inside and phloem on the outside. That tissue is very fragile, and you just bump that tree with equipment, or maybe you're pulling out cull trees or something of that nature, and it'll permanently damage, well, not permanently, it can try to cover over it. Let's see. Central leader, apical bud is taller, should be the tallest tree of the tree and so on. And we'll have pictures of that. Let's see. And do not prune flat to the stem. Again, I got a picture a series of pictures that shows what to do there. Seedlings, there's really not much to do. Try to resist unnecessary pruning. The key thing is you want just the one straight central leader. Saplings in the 1 to 3 inches diameter, and that's at breast height. You see that, the DBH. Prune to maintain the single straight central leader. Second point, if a fork exists, save the shoot or leader that is most vertical. Assuming they are nearly identical, save the one that has a strong lateral branch underneath it, which will help influence and straighten what you're wanting as the leader. So that's within tree competition. When one branch underneath another kind of forces the top one more straight up, and that really is of help to you. Let's see, getting down to third point, tree is hopelessly crooked and so on. Well, I copse it off near ground level, just a ½ inch or so off the ground, and the root collar and strong root system will put up multiple shoots or sprouts, and over the next year or two, you can start thinning them out, keeping the best one straightest and growing the best. Full-size trees, 3 to 6 inch DBH. Continue pruning with the same techniques as above. If a tree has never been pruned, and I'll be showing you some of those that are in that category, it's prune so that the single stem, and remove the largest branches, but limit annual pruning to no more than 1/3 of the leaf area that you take off the tree. prevent tearing of the bark down the tree. Make an initial cut about a foot from the stem so that you can hold on to that and cut that off. Get rid of that weight so that it doesn't pull off down the side of the tree. Again, if it's hopelessly crooked, we'll coppice it and so on. And initial spacing at 25, 35 feet is ample. Okay, this is what I bought and started in Callaway County in 1976. Just out of graduate school out of University of Missouri, and was working with DuPont Company. We were transferred from Wilmington, Delaware out to St. Louis. And, I bought this. To describe it, it's got two wet weather creeks on the left as you look at the picture. They merge together, and that's kind of a ridge, a low ridge of oak and so on in the background. And this area was pasture, and even where the oak were, it was all pastured. It's bluegrass back in those days, before that darn fescue got over everything. Okay, and exactly the same standing spot and so on. The trees now, they're uneven aged. I didn't plant any of these, and so they're gonna vary in size and so on. What I wanted to very briefly point out is that one almost right center that's leaning a little bit. And from the get-go, I should have culled that tree out and forced it to start over again. That tree has got a lot of pent-up energy in it. I took the 5-day felling course and so on, and trees that got a little more of a lean than that they are deadly. And there's one individual that used to work for the Missouri Department of Conservation. He was killed. They speak of this barber chair, and you make your notch there on the left, just like you normally do, and then come in with your chainsaw on the right. And about the time that little skinny rib there, it can't hold the weight of the tree, and it'll just barber chair and just take your head off. Okay, this is what the volunteer, uneven age volunteer walnut coming in that area. I'm looking now opposite the direction of what the prior pictures were taken at. And the lower two photos you see during dormant season. And this is 79 on the top again. And then in 2017, Missouri Department of Conservation wanted to put together a magazine article and so on. So one of their professional photographers came out and made a couple of good photos that they used in the. And this tree now is it's 17 foot to the first limb, and it's just over 18 inch. So it's doing okay. This is a much younger tree, but it's one of my favorites. And I have pushed, I've been aggressive in pruning. And at this point, it was right at about 17, 18 foot clear, but subsequently it's growing more, and I've taken off a little bit more on this. And there's really hardly any evidence of cat facing. And again, I'll show you pictures of what that looks like. This custom pruning of walnut started for me in 2002. 5 referrals as far as landowners that MDC wanted to have release of walnut via timber stand improvement and corrective pruning. And these were all over in Callaway County, where my land is. And I got to know some real nice people. And one of the very first one were the Dymekes. And some of you were on the 2008 tour here when we held it in Missouri National. And they're life members of Walnut Council. I noticed a plantation when I was driving over in Saline County. That's to the west of Columbia, about 50 miles, 40 miles. And there was a plantation growing along Highway 41, a state highway, and I saw it a couple trips as I was going back and forth and doing some work over in that county with the job that I had at that time with Missouri. And anyway, some of their neighbors that also had plantations and they knew each other and so on, and they saw where I was doing some pruning out there, and it ended up being four more plantations, or 5 in total. Several Missouri Walnut Council members asked me for coming out and showing some of the pruning on their trees. So this became 24 farms in 8 counties. About half of these farms are plantations and half are natural stands of walnut along creeks. Obviously, I have no idea how many trees. Here's the equipment that I basically depended on so much. The folding handsaw down here, that's a steel. And this is second blade on this one, but there's no telling how many branches, small branches, that I could standing on the ground or and be able to reach. Some people use a little clipper like on the left, and then there's a pocket knife. But that steel folding saw, and then the pole pruner. This is a Corona pole saw and clipper combination. You can see the clipper up here, and when you pull on this cable or whatever it's called, rope, I guess, you don't want your finger in right there, that's for sure. I see a little bit of sap buildup. If you've got that on your equipment, oven cleaner. Spray on oven cleaner, let it kind of soften that up, and you can wipe it off with a dry rag. You're probably wondering what in the world this is. Well, this is 8.5 foot stake, and I alternately painted so on. I covered the area I didn't want painted, and I use it in photos and so on. I urge new people to be taking photos and such that you can stand in exactly the same spot at a later date, and see how trees respond to your pruning and so on. That's where you'll really learn. This is where I was driving on State Highway 41 and driving back and forth, and you see where I'm elevated over the guy that's mowing. That's because it's starting to get close to that bridge on the left. And we'll see a couple other pictures later on that'll orient you here. So this was in 2003. This plantation was started in 94. And in 92, they took it out of rotation of corn and soybean. Yeah, this is small fields, but anyway, that's why they discontinued. They got it into the CRP program, which required tall fescue to be established, and then they planted the trees in 94. This is on the west side of the creek, I believe. The first tree on your right is a candidate for culling and so on. If you absolutely needed a tree, I think it's tolerable if you work on the top up here and so on. But I don't like that little bit of a sweep there. A lot of it'll dissipate as the tree gets bigger. But you got within 30, 35 feet, you got, my goodness, just go one direction, you got a half a dozen trees as alternate choices. A couple of things that, as far as deer rubs and so on, this poor tree has been, you can see where it was rubbed very severely a year ago, and it started to kind of cover back over, and darn, more than likely the same buck. I mean, that's his territory and so on. And and that's pushing it as far as will it cover over. This is after it's done a lot of covering over, different tree, obviously, different setting. My old rule of thumb was if the deer rubbing is damaged less than a third of the way around or circumference, why go ahead and keep it. But if it's more than that, definitely coppice it. And that's a new word to some of you. Coppice meaning cutting it off in this situation at a ½ an inch off ground level. Okay, now we're as far as pruning. What is the important part from I can't think of the word, as far as growth of the tissue and so on, healing, I guess, or covering over, is this collar, spoken of as a collar. You want to keep that there, where you can, where you're dealing with a small tree and you can hang on onto your with the left hand if you're right-handed and so on. And I just did with ink pen the angle of the cut. That tissue right in here has got the capacity or capability of covering over and healing quicker. If you stop and think of it, that's, trees have been having limbs and get busted off with life or with wildlife or whatever. And so the trees they can cover over and you want that to cover over quickly. Walnut has a capability of, the word will come to me now. I had it before I got started on the sentence. Anyway, where it compartmentalizes, I think that's the word I need, and it also, the surface in the wound seals over such that fungal organisms are not real successful in penetrating into that. Okay, the one on the left, I would say that's probably 2 years since I pruned that. And it's covering over that, what I took off was probably no more than 3/4 of an inch, possibly even less. This one, it's hard to tell, but just by the reference of the bark, I would guess it's at least 3/4, maybe pushing an inch. I like to get them off preferably at 1.5 at the very most. And again, the angle of the cut. Okay, now we're going to get into a series of various young trees. And this one, I would say, okay, the growth during that current year, that prior summer, would have been this. This would have been the tip. And so this one had a tip here and a here. If this had been cut off a year ago, this one would have straightened up considerably. And so one option is the quick way to give a tree a shot at being okay and so on would be to take off just that right hand one. Now we got a situation here that these two leaders are so far separated out that the best way, but it's time consuming, is to cut it off, or you make a tape, you tape it up first. And I've used duct tape. If you want, you can use masking tape, but it won't hold up very long. But duct tape it'll weather and not be an issue in about 2 years and so on. You'll see it getting ragged and starting to fall off. And I also trimmed these little twigs off so that this, my camera was not lining up with showing that, but keep that top where that is the dominant leader. Here you got a kind of a mess as well. You got a little bit of a V down here, and got rid of the one side. And this is quite central to the rest of the tree. So that's good. And you can see where there's nothing to take off there yet. I took off the tips of a couple of these. I left the bottom ones for 1 more year. again, this is a situation. This is a different plantation, and it had never been. These trees had never been pruned, and so on. So I say a tolerable dog leg. This is the concave side of the dog leg. This is the convex side. It will, and I've milled various sized trees. Lynn Barnacle, he also was with me, and we did one for him that he was going to use in classes or one thing or another. But it'll put down a wider annual ring on this concave side than it does on the convex side, and over time this will straighten. It'll probably never be as nice as this one for another 10 years, but and again, that's probably only 10, 12 feet apart, but you could keep this one for the time being anyway. Okay, first thought is, again, this tree back here, that's a better crop tree than this will ever be probably. But I went ahead and did what I'd call a stint. There's maybe a better word for it, but a piece of dry wood, and again with duct tape, and wrapped real tight right here and then up here. And what I'm kicking myself is I didn't make a point of getting out the year or two later and so on and see how this tree turned out. That's been so meaningful now during a discussion like this. So again, take photos. Back when I was taking these photos, this was with getting slides. And then I had the slide converted over so I get it in PowerPoint. Okay. One on the left, definitely coppice it or cut it off at ground level. Start over. The one on the right, you got an option here. It's kind of tough to do with ground equipment without just mutilating that, assuming that I can't reach it with a handsaw and hold it a little bit steady. I have not had good luck with high coppice like this. Immediately, you got the tree where you've got more taper, where as you get above that, where that yellow arrow is, it's starting off with pencil size leaders and multitudes of that will come out of that, and it's a mess. Again, with better trees behind it and so on, just coppice it and kill it. Okay, this one starting off on the left, it's a mess. And this whole area right here, you see the trees are not growing real good. And I'll get into why that was and so on shortly. You can see the progression, but I did that much. We talked about this one before. This one, very questionable. This is definitely a cull. Whoops, what happened? Here we go. I must have brought in a photo twice there. Actually, this is a different site. Nice day, beautiful day. But you can see where I took off some, but you'd want to take off and maybe a couple at each I'll call it a whorl, but it's where see this, the last year's growth was this. It's hard to tell from this, but I'd expect it's probably somewhere in the 18 to 24 inches in length. And another picture, you can see where missing branches and so on taken off. And that's a tolerable amount to take off. Okay, this has got the makings of a crow's nest, or the crow could make a nest there on top of that nest. And basically what I ended up doing is saving this leader right here. And I did it in stages where, some people would just take the tip off of these two, as shown here. But I went back and I took them all the way down. And again, I'm kicking myself. I didn't make a note of getting back to these exact trees, stand in the same direction and so on, and so on. I think we'll skip over this one and skip this one. This one is tolerable. Oh, hey, what I wanted to really point out, think of it this way. We've got within tree competition amongst the twigs, and we've got tree to tree competition, not in these settings at the age of these trees. And walnut really are not all that competitive with each other. They aren't good trainer trees. There's much better. But anyway, I lost my train of thought. Oh, the other, well, we talked about within tree and tree to tree competition. Now there you go. And I think I've taken some off previous year, a couple of branches right here. I think I see some stubs that are the cat facing over top. Yeah, this is on the west side of the creek. I can recognize the highway 41 there. But I don't think I'd pruned all of these trees yet on that given visit. I don't see branches on the ground. This is a mess. Easy choice. I guess what I did was I pruned this one off, and I don't know what happened with this thing. If I didn't, maybe I pruned it off a little bit too then. Okay, see what's done there. Overview of the west section. Okay, now we're in a different plantation. And one like this now has got a clear trunk, if you will. I'd say at least 17, 18 feet. And looking over at this one, I don't like the looks of that bump there. So if you don't need that tree, this is a candidate for removal. It's probably got a 8.5 foot butt log or 9 foot butt log to serve Fred's suggestion. Man, that one looks nice over here. So anyway, I've started, I've been pruning and so on. I don't know how many years, probably 12 years or so. And so some of these are looking pretty good, but, and don't be confused with this tree. There's another one behind it, right beside it. So that instead, trees like this, I left a couple of small ones because I was getting the top cleaned out so high up that I felt as though if I took these off, I might get sprouting anyway from it. So I just kind of left them for another year. Okay, these are the two grandsons of the owner there in Saline County. And so this was October 31st, and we were all out there with masks. But anyway, they're learning the art, and they're going to take over from here now with these trees. They got the tough job, two tough jobs. One is deciding which additional ones need to be taken out, which are the crop trees. And the other thing is fescue is really coming in. The one here on the photo on the left shows that readily. This is on a different farm where Ryan here was, he took off the weight of this tree, of this branch with the pole pruner. He clipped off, got the branch right here in the throat and pulled on the chain or the rope. And then that took the weight off, and then he come back and looks like he's using a saw there. You can get a more flush cut rather than with the clipper.
Harlan?
Yes.
Just a time check. It's 4:48.
Yep. I think we're in good shape.
Okay, good.
Yep. If I go any faster, it'll be a movie. Okay. this is a different site. This was actually it's in Callaway County. Third generation young farmer, and we've been going out there several years now, and this is unbelievable. The walnut growing, we're probably about 20 yards or so from a small creek, and it's excellent soil for the walnut because of, you know, down close to that creek and so on. Anyway, and I forgot my camera when we went out there the first day, and so I went out there just by myself next day, and with the pole pruner there. This is up to 15 feet to that point, and with he'll be able to, you know, make some mechanical pruning, but using the competition around, manage the competition around that tree. He'll have another 10, 12 feet above that. Cat face, got two examples, and this is cat facing from, I would say, a branch that at the cut was maybe an inch and a half in diameter, and same with this one. At a glance, I probably should ask you, where's the cat face in this one? The log buyers, what makes money for them or cuts down on losses and so on is recognizing that. And they can even recognize pin knots, which it'd take a long time to try to describe all of that, but I cannot see where a pin knot is. But you go out there in April or May, and when you can cut down a tree and rip off the bark, you'll see the pin knot sticking out. Okay, now we're going to go back to, this is that highway, Missouri 41. And a lot of the pictures were over in here. There were 3 sections of walnut that were planted in 94. Fescue was planted in 92. What I have been going back and forth on this road and going over to a farm where we had field research and precision ag that I was working with. And I had run equipment on the soybean stubble field after harvest. And on the way back, and that equipment was a 4-wheeler pulling a Veris. That's a 2-wheel thing. And it's got straight coulters that there's a charge, electrical charge that goes into the soil, and then it bounces back and it reads that bounce back. And if you got, this is soil electrical conductivity. This would be a tight clay, whereas this is coarser textured soil that gives that kind of a reading. And then another thing that we did was Hank Stelzer, the extension forester, came out and helped me. I used GPS or DGPS equipment, and I recorded the data and so on, but he was taking the measurements, breast height, diameter, and so on. And the point that I want you to focus on is this next photo here. Again, these continuous lines, that's where I use the 4-wheeler and so on. These other spots, that's where Hank was measuring the breast height, diameter, and so on. Look at the strong correlation of clay soils versus dead trees or wannabe dead trees. Again, it's telling as to why. Boy, the trees right in here, let's see, let me go back here. The trees right in here are going real good. Obviously here's the best in the whole lot, and just a few clumps and so on there. Okay, now this is at Dime McKee Farm. I've only got about 5 more slides or so left. Dime McKee Farm, I don't remember the year, but the Dime McKee Farm is when we had the 2008 tour, and their house burnt down in March or something like that, and we were all descending on the scene in last of July, 1st of August. But anyway, so that's where this is. But I had done a lot of TSI on this farm and taken data on stands and so on. And it's typically about 6 such trees like this walnut on average. You might go for 100 yards after where Fred is standing and not see a walnut tree, and then all of a sudden there's several. And that's all a matter of where there was a seed tree. Squirrels are good about planting them, but they don't go very, the smart ones don't go very far from the safety of trees. This is still at Dymeke Farm. This, you can see where I had a few years prior to this, I guess it would have been in 2003 or so, where I ringed the trees and killed them. Killed the, I don't know, maybe elm, who knows what. But this tree has never been pruned. And it had the trainer brush around it. So that's, I'll say this probably multiple times now, but it's, now we're into tree to tree competition. And we got to learn how to manage that competition. This is in another farm. I did a lot of work. This is, man, with the sun. And you can see my 8.5 foot stake and the number of times you can lay that on up there, but it's got at least 30 to pushing 40 foot clear. And there's a sycamore tree, I believe it's this one's the sycamore tree, and I've killed it subsequent to this. So this is the same site, probably just 30 yards from. These are 3 MU foresters, Michael Gold, and I can't remember the names of the other 2. But you can see, I think these were hickory, these others, and whereas the 3 foresters, I said, go stand by a walnut tree. And that, I mean, there's not a limb on them until you get up to this crotch. Okay, this is within spitting distance of US Highway 54 right over here in Callaway County. These trees, I sure never pruned them. I mean, if there was manual pruning, why would it have to been done a long time with equipment different than what I've got? This again is the tree responded, it was keeping up with competition, so it kept putting all of its growth in the terminal and cut back on feeding the branches lower down, and so they dried up and just fell off. So again, you're looking at 30 plus feet of clear growth. Okay, you can see the Avaz Creek right behind here. Where Glenn is standing is probably only, I don't know, 15 yards, 20 yards at the most from the bank of the Avaz Creek. And so my question I kept asking Glenn is, he's lived there on that farm for about 40 years. He's very sensitive to poison ivy, but he can get out there during this kind of a time of the year. And I kept asking him, how in the world these trees got, growing? If they had more space, open space, they would have more limbs here. And he says, well, I did rent a dozer and you can't see it on this picture, obviously, but to the right, he mounted up to keep the water from coming up over the bank of the Avaz Creek and onto his field. And there's a real beauty. And this is my last slide. But this typifies what I wish that we would do, is help these farmers and so on, landowners. When this had been back in 1990, he was doing something. You can see lines there. It was mowed or tilled or something. And that same spot now, and I've been managing what's coming up through that. And I just wished I could see live long enough to see some of the fruits of the labor there. But that's my last slide, and it's been a pleasure trying to hurriedly go through these, and hope it be of some help.
Harlan, we have a couple questions. Mike Trial said, Harlan, you might want to add that when you coppice a tree, the resprout will grow back twice as fast as the original tree grew, which is good for fast growth and provides an uneven age stand. Don't be afraid to coppice.
I would agree with Mike to much of that. Obviously, when you're coppicing off something that the tree is standing there 12 foot tall, you coppice it off. The multiple sprouts are going to be, for several years, are going to be 10 foot shorter.
Walt asked unfortunately at 4:30, so I don't know, we didn't capture it when it was happening, but do I see Roundup around some trees?
Okay, he's speaking of my photos there along Highway 41 probably, and so on. Yeah, back when I first started this, even on my own place, I first started trying to think now, I would have used Carmex Diaron. And then, pre-emergent materials, but also post-emergence, that was way before Roundup. I can't think now what I would have been using.
I think the point of the question is you are using herbicide to control fescue and other competition below the trees, correct?
Yeah.
David had a question. I'm not sure I understand it. Maybe you do. Can you do anything with thinned 4 to 8 inch DBH walnuts from a plantation where trees were originally 12 to 15 foot centers, and I am now increasing spacing?
Wanting to know probably is there a market for the trees?
Oh, the thinnings. Gotcha. Yeah, I wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah, Fred, I don't know if he wants to tie into that. I have milled a lot of walnut and a lot of other species, and you just end up with some narrow boards, and you're going to have stretches in there where maybe 2.5 feet where there's no evidence of knots and this and that, and it's not going to bring a premium even as sawed material and so on. And loggers will not be real aggressive in buying it.
Now they're leaving larger logs than that in the treetops now, and the only there's guy outside of Columbia here. He's been thinning his plantation. He bought a wood miser, and he's probably making enough off the wood to pay for the gas in the wood miser. Hugh over there in Indiana, he was selling some 12 and 14 inch diameter trees to furniture maker, Amish, I believe. And he was basically a break-even thing, but it was better than just cutting them up and laying on the ground. Usually you get a small tree like that, and by the time you take the sapwood off and the defects in the center, you have toothpicks left. So it's not a very desirable piece of merchandise. People don't really like it for firewood.
That being said, people have a lot of reasons psychologically and otherwise for not thinning, and the fact that wood will go to waste, quote unquote, is not a good reason, because you are reducing the value of what you're leaving in the stand by not taking those off at the right time. I had a question, or where did it go? Let's see. Bob said you might suggest a planting spacing that reduces the need for pruning. You can take remembering that I'm adding this, there's a trade-off between your spacing, which creates competition and will reduce the amount of pruning you need to do.
Oh boy, real.
Fred, you want to talk about that? Harlan looks like he's talked too long.
Go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, my feeling is you're trading off there. If you plant them thick enough where they naturally prune themselves, Up in Wisconsin, I think we were someplace, and they started thinking about thinning the trees at 15 years, and they have a lot of stems per acre. So they've traded 15 years for extra work, in my opinion, because you're going to have to cut out an awful lot more trees, and it's a lot easier to prune 35 trees, and in 15 years in a plantation, the trees on average will be 7.5 inches in diameter. You'll have 2 or 3%, they'll be 15 inches, and then you'll have a few that's going to be 1.5 inches. But you're trading off, and you're still have to do thinning on if you plant 300 stems per acre. But if you got 2,000 out there, that means you're going to be cutting out 1,975 trees, which is a whole lot more effort than cutting off a few branches here and there. Well, not here and there, a few branches on every tree. So
you might have to go back more often, pruning annually or every other, where thinning you may only go in once and again. But you're right, there are several trade-offs there. Bob also mentioned on the idea of the boards. You can take the narrow boards and glue them up after edging and plane them and then stain them. So if you do have the equipment, there are ways you can process that material. Mike Trial, I agree with Harlan, and you can sawmill small die logs. I have a sawmill, and as Fred just said, you may be able to pay back the gas for the sawmill. The downside is it takes almost as much time and handling to saw a small log than a large log. So I think we're all in agreement that it might be a fool's errand, but it's definitely an enjoyable hobby, and having those products can be nice to make new things from. Any other questions for our speakers? Well, looks like we might be wrapping that up then. I do appreciate your time today, Harlan and Fred. We appreciate your insights and the experiences that you shared with us. And we thank all of you for joining us today. So I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you.